board. The time is now 6:33 on January 29th. You'll rise with me to do the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gonzalez. Here. Gray. Here. Alston. Here. Horne. Here. Pop.
Here.
And Racick. Here. Thank you.
At this time, we have open to the public. Because this is a special meeting, the topics need to be related to the agenda items only. So if you have any comments or whether you want to make, come to the podium at this time.
Mayor, may I make a statement first?
Sure.
I'm under the impression from our last meeting that this is a committee meeting of the whole, not a board meeting. I have no minutes to tell me different. And that is the last thing that happened at our last meeting. Mr. Holston brought up the budget. Some of us brought up, Heidi Gonzalez did bring up an item on here, and I brought up economic development. But
Sure.
this should be a committee of the whole.
No.
Okay?
There's a difference.
There sure is a difference. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Sure. At a committee meeting, if I help me out on this, Larry, at a committee meeting, you can discuss issues, you can make recommendations, you can make advisory scenarios, but you cannot actually make any decisions.
Correct.
If you're gonna make any
You
decisions,
are.
sorry,
I agree with you 1,000%.
but if any decisions need to be made, then it needs to be a board meeting, even if it's a special board meeting. So whether it be a committee of the whole or whether it be a special board meeting, the only difference in the technicality of that, I believe, is the ability to make decisions if necessary.
It's a very large difference. Very large difference.
I think Mr. Trustee Pop's point was when I asked for a meeting, I asked for a meeting for the committee on the whole. I did not ask for a special meeting. So somebody else must have called a special meeting, just for the record, who called the special meeting.
Yeah.
If I may, Mayor. It works. As long as the notice was published 48 hours, which it was by Michelle, and the newspaper received notice, which obviously they have, or the media, the mayor has the right to call a special meeting, or 2 or 3 trustees on the
Sure.
committee. A special meeting, to be perfectly honest, is probably safer than a committee as a whole, because even a committee as a whole, technically all the trustees could show up. A committee as a whole can only operate, strike that, can only vote if they are authorized to do so. But if push comes to shove, it's probably more prudent to have a special meeting, and then that way the board has the authority to act. So the mayor does have the right to call a special meeting.
Not questioning that.
And it wasn't a matter, just so you understand, I think I may have misunderstood or imposed an interpretation of what you were asking for, not to be bypassing anybody's expectations, but when there is a discussion pertaining to the ACH option to be voted on at this meeting, the only way that could have even taken place, because Darryl was gonna bring some information regarding the auto pay option through Locus, which is our database that we use, the only way that could have been dealt with as a vote at a meeting of this type would have to be a special meeting, not a committee meeting.
So for this to be, I'm confused, since I'm new, I'll admit.
Well, that's fine.
Confused. Since this is a special meeting, though, wouldn't we still be, because it's the next meeting after the last one, wouldn't we have to review the minutes from the last meeting? Because a number of these items are on the agenda, were in the last meeting.
I believe a special meeting, Larry, help me out on this, but I believe that the regular minutes and the special minutes would be reviewed at the next regular meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
So
What's
it's
the
just a
bottom
matter
line
of,
here? Are we allowed to change from a committee meeting to a special meeting without any input from any trustees? That's what I'm reading here.
well, and there again, it was not an intent.
Well, I'm not saying it was, Mayor. I'm saying I came here feeling we had a committee meeting.
What do you hope to accomplish in a committee that you don't hope to accomplish? in a
Discussion
special
of economic development, which is on there, that we haven't discussed in months.
Well, that was brought up by one of the trustees.
That's correct. And the website, which was brought up by someone,
And that's gonna be addressed.
was not at a committee meeting.
So I'm trying to functionally, understand what you're thinking, that you're not being
Not
short.
voting on anything, not passing any
You don't have to.
ordinances or.
You don't, trustee Pop, you don't have to vote on anything per se. The point is if you don't have it on the agenda, and you don't have it as a topic, you can't, if you take away the voting option, that's really the biggest difference of a committee
Exactly.
versus,
Exactly, that's the point I'm trying to make.
and I'm confused as to why you feel offended that there would be a
Not
voting.
offended, just a miscommunication here.
And I
It should be a committee meeting.
And as a matter of precaution, as the attorney indicated, it's safer to go with labeling it a special meeting than to call a committee of the whole, even though functionally they operate with minor variation, almost identical.
Well, that should have been mentioned in our last meeting,
Well,
or
and I-
decided.
And I think if I remember the exact words too, I think we voted to have, do we think we need a special meeting for this? And I think those words were exactly spoken. Not committee meeting, I believe the words were exactly spoken. I think we need a special meeting next Wednesday.
Or actually, it was brought up 3 weeks ago.
Correct. Again, when trustee Halsted brought up the finance,
Right.
some of us were unclear on it, and some of us were directed to speak with our finance person, and we said, should we go 2 weeks or 4 weeks? And we decided, I believe, 4
Since
weeks.
we had an extra week this month.
Correct,
Right.
where we are right now. And so we sat down with him, and as the weeks progressed, we added, this meeting was just gonna talk about our finances.
Right.
And now we've added the highlights of the 2013 audit, review the budgets. But again, I think what we're trying to get at is, we have a sheet of paper.
Sure.
We don't have any background of anything of, like, the review budget, the highlighted 2013 audit. We don't have, as we usually have in our trustee.
A packet.
Correct.
Understood.
We don't have that. So
Okay.
I think that's where we're.
And whether this had
we're
been,
going.
whether this had been a committee meeting of the whole or a special meeting,
I'm sorry. Clerk Hazer, is there something that we're missing that we're laughing at?
Well, no, I just find it amusing, nobody picks up their packets except one or two trustees, so I find that amusing. And
Okay.
usually it's
This
the
one?
night of, you guys pick up the packets, you guys generally.
Right,
So-
just-
So,
But-
I'm
but-
on that, that's-
and aside from proceeding.
And again,
I get it, I get it. So I believe that 3 weeks ago, was it, I believe, when it was requested that we have a meeting. I won't get into a committee versus special, I think every committee meeting is special, so that's, but it was brought up regarding some concerns regarding financial, the budgetary related issues. We had just gone through an audit, had information that had been available to us. I had requested that each of the trustees, I'd asked each of the trustees if they could to take some time to meet with Daryl and review any concerns they had regarding the budget or pertaining to the audit or whatever else. That way, when we actually had this meeting, it's more of a summary of what you've already gathered. So the packet, if you will, is more of a review of things that have already been presented in one form or another, or discussed in one form or another, on an individual basis with either staff members or whatever else. And this is merely to bring it to a head for final discussion and to set the tone going forward for, because now we gotta start getting prepared for our audit, I mean, our budget for the next year and everything else, and until we start working through some of these things. And since this is all finance related, I was able to get the auditing firm to actually come out and, answer additional questions. Admittedly, I'm new, Daryl's new, there's a lot of us, half the board's new. So in that regard, it's good for us to have a little bit of a.
Right, and on that sense,
We're not voting on ordinance.
no, we're not voting on anything, but I
regular.
also sat down with Daryl and
Right.
some of us did it. And a lot of it would go smoother if we all did it, in this sense.
Right.
Because this is the finances of the business. This isn't, this isn't something that somebody wants to do. It doesn't matter what trustee, trustee Gonzalez or Trees or myself with the Park.
Sure.
This is everybody in the village, all, over 5,000 people in the village, and their taxes, and where's the money going?
Agreed.
And we should have all sat down with our finance director and said, hey, where are we at? You know, basing on what Trustee Halstead's statement was, where are we with this village?
Understood.
And so, I mean, tonight could go a lot smoother, but it's, obviously, we're 15 minutes into it, and we haven't gotten to anything.
Understood.
So-
And as things came up, and as there was an expressed level of urgency on additional things,
Right.
I know Trustee Gonzalez had brought up about the website. There's someone. Immediately reached out to the developer to say, where we stand on this, because I'm catching a lot of heat, and I don't mind catching the heat for the part that I'm responsible for, but we gotta have something that delivers, or goodbye. Just passing the ultimatum on, if you don't mind. But there's things that I'm still, and I'll be quite honest in front of the whole board, public, whatever else, there's things that I'm still trying to figure out what I don't know yet about the operations of the village. It's frustrating for me. And there again, is that any one person's responsibility or fault other than myself? No, because maybe I need to push harder. You know what I'm saying? Is there other people that are potentially contributors to that? Yeah, I believe so, but that's not the point. The point is that we all need to push a little bit more. We don't necessarily have to push here, but if we don't get the results on a one-on-one situation, then we do need to bring it back here, and we do need to push, you know? And, you know, Trustee Gonzalez had brought it up about the website once before. Okay, now, would I personally like a little bit of heads up so I can diffuse the situation a little bit? Oh, yeah. But, you know, if somebody believes I'm not doing my job, members of the public are more than welcome to come up to the microphone and yell at me for 3 months. You know,
If I can interrupt,
yeah,
back to Mr. Pop's original point, I believe the attorney, village attorney, pretty well explained to us that this, whatever it was intended, anybody, including the mayor, can call a special meeting. So what we may have thought was just a committee on the whole. It is a special meeting, and you are certainly within your rights to do that, sir.
but I want to make sure everybody understands. I'm not trying to do anything other than.
We'll know next time. We'll know next time to clarify.
Well, and there again, it's a safeguard. You know, every time we have a whole committee meeting of the board where we're focusing on be a workshop related thing, and I know Trustee Holston had brought up, and I'm grateful for his input and insight for economic development matters. But the reality is, there are times when we're gonna spend so much time on certain issues, we don't need to spend our typical 2.5 hours at a regular meeting when we need to just get to the meat of other matters that hopefully we can address and be done with those and get back to a regular, you know, yeah, so.
Your Honor, if I may, Deputy Clerk Powell just gave me a copy of the minutes from January 8th that were approved at the January 22nd meeting, and it clearly states each trustee is to research this area and schedule meetings with the finance director and treasurer. Next sentence is, all these meetings will take some time, so the special meeting should be scheduled accordingly, tentatively January 29th. So it was in their packet, they have it, it's a matter of record.
That's fine. And there again, I know it may sound like splitting hairs, you know, when dealing with the attorney. I think it's, you know, and it's not just because it's within my right to trump this committee of the whole and call a special meeting. It's a safeguard. I'd rather be safe than sorry. And Trustee Pop, my apologies if there was a misinterpretation or communication on that matter. It is still under open to the public, so if anybody else has anything they'd like to say. Okay. At this time, are we good with open to public? I want to make sure I'm hearing everything that needs to be heard. Okay. Trustee Gonzalez had brought up, and we've requested the developer of the new website come and give a presentation. Based on our improvisation, I have to step down in order for this to happen. I guess, gentlemen, we need to go around that way so we can see what's going on. And Mr. Flamone, DJ, if you can help him with that, I'll get that screen started here for you.
Okay, there should be the- everybody has that.
Is it picking up the second screen?
I'm looking to see right now, just adding the resolution.
You have a duplicate or?
Yes, it was a duplicate, then extended.
Okay. Should have said I wanted to know what you.
Yeah, I'm looking for just going to the VGA side. Yeah.
Sure. Fine. Nobody's afraid of the dark in there, are they? While he's doing that, I just want to bring the board's attention after years of use of the projector and the park and everything else, you'll notice it's starting to get out of alignment there. The man on the screen there does not have two heads, it just looks sort of like it. It's perhaps time for upgrading some of our equipment for the movies in the park.
Okay. That'll work. Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Twyman. I'm a developer from Division 84, and I'd like to give you a small presentation, just an overview of the website, its capabilities, and anything else that can be done with it. Beginning here at the top, we have simply your logo and a few menu items. Under each menu items, with the exception of home, you have a drop-down filled with different links, images, a description of the area, things along those lines. And thank you. Any of these items here can be easily changed. I spent some time with the assistant village administrator, Bob Ray, and the assistant clerk, Michelle Powell, working on how to make any type of updates to this, so they're fully aware, and I would say at this point has a pretty good knowledge to teach a few others a few simple things to change within the website. So just going to, again, a quick overview. We have a drop down, for example, residents. We have everything that was included on the original site, with the exception of a few extra things. I've spent some time trying to transfer as much information as I can from the previous website into this one. And there are just about every links to everything. So anyone who's looking for any kind of information regarding the village can find it quickly. And I know it may be a little difficult to see since I did have to zoom out so you can see the entire, everything within the screen that you would see on a normal computer. All right. Now we scroll down here, what we do have is a slideshow. Now these are just a couple of dummy images that I picked up across the internet just to give an example. Now, with any of these, text can be added as well as links. So for example, if you were to speak with education in this slide right here, you can add, let me go back here. Speak on education here, you can put anything, a few ideas I tossed out while development was, for example here, education in Monee. There you can have links to any of the pages you have regarding any type of education or any child activities, youth activities, anything along those lines. And those can be created for any of these. Everything else for the site is completed, this is completed, but just looking for ideas from any trustees or anyone that would, or what you exactly would like to see on here. Scrolling down a little further, we have a little information here about upcoming events. Again, this is a little bit out of whack because I had to zoom out the screen, so maybe putting one or two things a little out of place. But it just provides a little information on upcoming events in Monee. I just put a couple of dummy information things here. You can add things to your calendar. You can see where they're taking place within the village. For your main events, for example, here as well, you will probably put something like your fall fair once it gets here, one of your larger events that people can come, see, and participate. Moving down a little further, we just have a lot of different just links that you can choose that take you to all different areas around the village. The village site. Information about education, about outdoor activities, dining activities, your golf courses, license permits, and these can be swapped out with any page that's currently within the website as of right now. A little further, we have your quick links. So any information that probably isn't this point is up here, but you would still like to display and make known can be placed here, and just a simple welcome message. Take a look at the pages here.
Can you click on any, like, or any of the?
Oh
the
yes, all of them are clickable. Yes, all of them are active. I'm sorry?
So
Yes.
is there anything under there you're transferring? Like,
Yes, I grabbed any and everything. I grabbed as much as I could from the site, so let's go to fishing, for example.
I kind of like the one that's on there.
Oh, well, just about all these images are images from your site or images that I have purchased that you all are able to use. I would say there are only a few that are unavailable, but I'll be let you know what those are. So
Where'd you catch that fish at?
Just to clarify, you said that the village administrator or assistant administrator can change it as
anything at any time. You have full control of everything within the site. Basically, if you're able to change a Word document, you can change just about anything on this website.
So this is technically a template, then it's not like they need to learn HTML to be able to progress.
That's correct. It's custom made, but I fully templated everything, so it's easy to change.
So you are developing the website itself, and they will be responsible for the content?
That's correct. At any time, I've made myself available to them or anyone else who needs to know how to make any changes in case anybody forgets or anything, but I am adding documentation. Just everything on the administrative side is pretty self-explanatory, but I do provide documentation so you can see how, just in case anyone forgets or someone new comes in and needs to know how to make edits to the site.
Okay, and then the ones, the clickables on the top, the menu drop downs. Or maybe you can answer this better too, and I know, if you could go back to home, Justin?
Sure.
On this menu bar here, where do you picture, or where do you think, like our ACH, you know, our online payment will be able to get, so the residents can find that quickly?
Could you actually add an additional?
Oh yes, you can add as many things to it up here as you like. I would say probably the best place would be under residents. You can have just one item here that says pay utilities, and you can jump right to that page. Everything within these drop downs, even the main items at the top themselves, are fully editable. So you guys have just about control of just about everything.
I think I,
And then the documents too, so if we need to, you know, like for the, we were talking about the car registrations last time, that we can put the forms right on there.
Sure can.
Yeah, great, okay.
There's an area right over here. You can add more if you'd like. I added, there's an area called Village Resources. All the current PDFs that you have on there now. You know, you have everything up there that's on your current site now. All that's easily able to be put on there at any time. Changed, added, removed, anything you like.
And what's the template that you're using on this one? What is it powered by?
Oh, it's actually, what I've used is, I've used a system called WordPress. However, it's not enough, it's not just one that off the shelf one. I pretty much completely gut the administrator area and the front side. I just like to use that CMS system because it's very user friendly for you all to make updates to it. So that's what I decided to use.
And this is free to us, or is this a monthly or registration?
Oh, no. You, besides your monthly hosting, just like with any other website, it's completely powered on its own. There's no monthly fee to use any type of the services that are currently on there, maybe except for, a gateway, which I believe you're debating which one to use at this time. But that would be the only cost. I would say one other potential item besides that, if you want to take, I'm not sure if you want to take credit cards on the village site itself or pass it off to your merchant. But if you do take if you do take payments on the village site directly, you will need one security certificate, known as an SSL. Those can range anywhere from about $99 a year to $150 a year, depending on what exactly you want. A few other items within here, as I spoke earlier, you have your local events, and it's all based, and everything can be reached basically directly from this navigation area. Here I added a couple other things, like saying for the weather. Any of these items can be swapped out if you think something else is more important that you'd like to place in there. It can all be mixed and matched in and out.
Let me ask you a question if I could.
Sure.
We've had some weather situations recently that are serious concern at times.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we have the ability to put news updates or flash alerts or whatever kind of thing like that? Storm advisory or like storm shelter situations and stuff like that. Where would that fit in there?
Sure. Well, there's an area right above the top. I didn't place an alert in there now, but there's a ticker area right across the top. So just in case you have, it's set up in two different ways. There's an alert, and there's a standard alert, and there's an emergency alert. And a standard alert will allow a blue ticker to tick right across the top of the screen, placing any type of information that you'd like to see. That would show up with white text with the blue background, and then there's emergency alerts that will show up in red with a red background with white text to display the urgency of what's going on. Again, like I said, I didn't place anything up there. I haven't placed any alerts up there, but there is an area just like any other things here. Just type in what you want, pops right up. As soon as you decide to take it down or it's over, just remove it. It's gone.
And you can put a timer on those too then?
You can set a start, end, and end date. Yes. So if you know something's going to go on, for example, I believe you guys have your hydrant flushing during the warmer months every Sunday. You can either place that just on the home page, or you can add an alert that show up on Sundays that just pops up, and then when Sunday's over, it's not Sunday, Wednesday's over, it's just gone.
Excuse me, Justin, for the emergency messages, can that be done remotely?
They can be. Actually, this website can be accessed from anywhere as long as you have the correct credentials. They can be accessed from anywhere, so anyone just sitting at home and you know a bad storm's coming, you hear it the night before on the news, you can just log in directly from home as long as you have the correct credentials and make those changes. Another nice feature is it keeps everything here is kept track by a login system, so everyone has their own login. You can see who logged in, when they logged in, what they did to the site. There's a record kept of everything, so everyone has a personal responsibility that has a login to it.
And then the administrators will be able to find out.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, I had a question here. So a lot of the pictures, well, with the exception of, there's a few of those, but, okay. So there's a lot of, my point is, there's a lot of stock pictures in there. Who are you working with to swap out pictures and get?
We do that.
The
Yes,
administrators.
we do that, we do.
So,
So,
and let me just bring this up, just as a point, good topic there, Doug. We definitely need more local photos. We talked to one of the photographers in town, I've gotten some from her, but the reality is, and we gotta set the tone for what our village is about, and there's only so many of us that are inclined to enjoy photography. But the ones that do, I think we need to have a contest, maybe. A photo contest to contribute photos that we can use for this and other things, so that's something to consider, because we gotta, you can use stock photos, but it becomes pretty obvious and it looks like everybody else's. And I think we did grab some of the same photos that had been on the previous site
Yes.
for continuity, so we have less to deal with initially.
Yes.
And I really don't care how old the pictures are, if they're still relevant to the context of what we're trying to promote. But, I mean, I got a picture of you in there when you were 12. No, just kidding. Just kidding. But
So,
Since you're on Facebook, you have a Facebook link right down there, and people can upload their own personal photos, and then you can click it and you look at it.
Let's be careful. Let's remember that this is a government page. There does need to be a certain amount of restraint exercise.
And we are in the process, we are kind of, and just bring it about Facebook, there are, just a review, I don't want to burden people with information here on this, because of Open Meetings Act and the requirements related to that, we do have to be careful of, let's say Heidi and Doug both post something to a comment related to the village, we then have to be careful because there's two voting officials, and if I or Dave or somebody else had also posted there, potentially that makes you vulnerable to the contemporaneous communication. So we just have to be careful about that.
This isn't intended to be a political appeal or Facebook appeal. This is government information, which pictures are nice, but I would caution a little bit of restraint there.
Well, you don't like the one you're on
No.
there? Okay.
You sign the release.
That's patented.
All right, proceed.
sure. A few other things that are included are job postings and the ability for employers within Monee to automatically upload job postings directly on their own. If they have an opening, they are able to go directly to the website and post the job opening. Now, it doesn't show up immediately in the job postings area. It needs to be approved, looked over and approved by someone, by one of the administrators of the site.
So we have the ability to determine what things should be approved by some administrator.
Yes,
And you can modify it if necessary based on approval.
correct.
And so they will be notified, the administrators will be notified by email that, hey, somebody posted something for approval.
Yes, several things can be sent out to, several notices can be sent out via email by whoever you want to receive them. Not only that, but once an administrator logs in, they're also prompted again that someone's left a job posting. This also is the case for anyone who would like to rent areas owned by the village, for example, the pavilion. They're able to make a request to say, hey, I would like to use it from this day to this day. Again, it's sent in to an administrator and not shown on the calendar that that area is in use until it's been approved.
I got a question.
Sure.
Village ordinances, where are those gonna be under?
They can be placed within the government area. I don't believe we currently have a page for that now, but pages can be created on the fly, just like anything else on here can be changed.
Currently, that's an external link to Sterling,
Yeah.
which, whether it's external or a direct link or whatever else,
Where you click on it and then register. Because I've been doing
And it can be
the research past couple weeks for the air braking, and every village's website has it on there.
sure.
So under the government.
Too.
the government drop-down.
Ours has a link.
Yeah, the current site does, I'm sure you'll.
I didn't see it on this one.
You want to check government, see if it's even already there?
Sure. Ordinances, let's see.
Under government.
Let's see.
Cool. No, it's code enforcement.
Code enforcement. I don't believe it'd be in the village resources. If it's not there now, it can easily be placed. To create a page is, like I said, literally just like editing is creating a Word document, creating a new page is exactly the same thing.
I don't think you can create a page, you still bring to Sterling websites.
I noticed on the beta page, there was a lot of it in Spanish. If you have the ability when it comes live to control, which.
Oh, well, it's not a different language, it's just dummy text. It's called Libsyn text. It's just to place something there to just get your mind thinking. It's so you can see what's there and say. It's a lot easier way to say, okay, we don't have anything there, instead of just leaving it blank, show you what it would look like.
Okay.
That way, anytime you just go in there, delete whatever is there, and put whatever little text you like.
Gotcha.
Okay, Justin, now that your timeline, that you're designing this and putting the site together and to go live, you have a deadline date in mind and Barb, to get content in so we can make it available to the public?
Sure. Well, all the coding is complete. I've spent I would say the last 1 to 2 days just putting in the old content from the old site into this one, just a lot of copy and pasting. Besides that, all the coding that everything needs to function is done. So at this point, it's just waiting on content from the village to place into it. Besides that, everything else is completed.
Okay, and then and so you're in the old website then as well?
Yes. Well, I'm just on the front side, that is copy and pasting things off of it.
Okay, so my please, just put on the front page of the old website, under construction, coming soon, brand new, brand spanking new website.
Sure.
So people aren't saying like, what the heck is going on?
Sure. Well, nothing on the old site has changed at all, so nothing's.
That's the point.
Oh,
That's my
I'm
point.
sorry. Sure.
Exactly, so it's loud and clear that coming soon.
George Pearson is still trustee.
Yeah.
Sure. I can place something right across there that says, you know, whatever timeline you guys would like to get content in. I can assist with help putting content in along with the administrators to help put things in.
And
Shouldn't be a
I
problem.
truly wouldn't mind, be able to help with
Sure. Let's see here. That's just about all the features. Another nice thing we have are the redirects from the old site. For example, if someone has something bookmarked from the old site that they usually go check in, or if they can't remember anything along those lines, it allows us to, if they click that old bookmark, it doesn't go to that whole page, it'll just redirect us to wherever you guys want, wherever you want it to be now. Because I believe you don't have I believe your Public Works and Water Department are now one now. So if someone had the Water Department link in their browser or bookmark or something, whenever they go to that page, it'll automatically just redirect them to your new Public Works Department.
A number of web pages for villages have links where village officials can go right from there to their Outlook or calendar, or does this have that ability? Is there any tie-in?
There can be a tie-in for anyone. If, for example, if a trustee has a login, they'll be able to log in, look right at their profile page and click and go directly there. Another nice feature is if someone would like to contact you in the public, there's no need to place your email directly on there. There's a little form that'll pop down for each trustee or each department or anyone you'd like to be able to be contacted. You know, people can put in their name, email, their message to you, hit submit, goes right to you. There's no need for anyone to spam your email or any spam bots to see your email on the site and just start sending you stuff.
So, if I heard you correctly, our village administrator, assistant administrator, and Michelle could start tomorrow
Yes,
with this.
putting in content immediately, yes.
And we could have it online for people who want to see it immediately?
Yes.
They can go to this currently right now, trustee Olson, just go to beta.villagemonee.org.
I have done that, it's in Spanish,
It's like, it's okay.
or Latin,
Ipsum,
whatever.
Ipsum.
Non-English.
So a few
You can do
pages
that,
may still be.
What I'm saying, if we're gonna, we're being televised tonight, if we tell people they can start going to it tomorrow, then we need to be able to.
Well, the official site is www.villagemonee.org. The beta site is preliminary, so people can get to it to preview it, to make recommendations for content and things of that sort.
Okay, so I'm hearing two different things. I'm hearing we're not in a position to go live tomorrow.
You don't have the content.
Right.
When will we be in a position to go live?
That's gonna be up to our staff.
Okay, that's not a question for you.
No.
You're telling us from your perspective, we're ready to hold it, it's not you.
As far as you're
Okay.
concerned, other than helping us out by adding a couple of links, like trustee Razek asked for the code
Yes.
Sterling page to be directly linkable on there. And frankly, if you're showing the girls how to do that, all the better, so that they know how easily they can, that's good tutorial. So, as
Sure.
far as you're concerned, you're done.
Yeah, I'll
But
put coding
you're-
aside,
but
so.
you're still available for assistance and things of that sort.
That's correct.
So what I'm hearing, Heidi, is that it's an administrative, it's not an issue.
Well, and that's what, before that they start putting content in, that probably is a few weeks, a month away to get all the content in. But as far as design changes, that we can still contact you, Justin, and say, I have this idea, how can we do this?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And those are just about all the features of your site. If anyone has any questions.
A couple of enhancements, I know you brought up, you were showing Michelle and Laura, I think Ruben too, but that was the registration or facility reservations or something like that.
Oh yes, that's one of the things I brought up. So if anyone wants to rent a venue, they can, as I was referring, just like the jobs, anyone can go in and request a venue, see what days are available. It makes a formal request, it sends it into, the notifications get sent to whoever you like it to be sent to. They can then approve it, deny it, or, contact the person directly, because it's required that they put in their email, their name, their phone number, and any message they'd like to send as well.
And then the links on the one of the page, like residents, I saw like for kids to do, there was like boys and girls clubs, and so we'll have baseball registration and football registration, we can put the link right on to their websites, right?
Yes, you can put any link directly on the website, and it'll send them to wherever they need to sign up.
Wherever the association websites for registration,
Yes.
okay?
Any additional questions or comments from the board?
Who's
No,
set
I
up as
wrote down a bunch of
administrator?
things, but
How many administrators can you have?
You can have an unlimited amount of administrators. You can also limit what areas certain administrators have access to. So if someone is responsible just for example, booking venues, you can give them a login just to access that area and not mess up anything else.
And then, I'm sorry, I missed that just for a second there. So you can have people that are capable of contributing content but not approving the final publication as well?
You have that as well. You have people who could just add things but not publish them to the site. So for example, if they make a change, it has to be approved by someone who has a little more administrative power. Also, you what I was stating before is you have the ability for someone to access one area. So if they have, like I said, access to booking, they can just approve or deny someone else's booking request and not get to, for example, the government page or the visitors page or the residents page.
You're talking about for administrative input?
Yes,
You're not blocking out sections of the site to the public, that's available?
that's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Or so like if, for car registration, so Michelle would have access, so when somebody sent in a vehicle registration, it would come just to her to look at it, register.
Yes, it is, you can change, for example, you can have something go to one person or 20 people. It's unlimited on who it can go to.
Now, do you guys want to look under the hood at all? Because I know you're talking about this ambiguous administrative section. Do you want to see what the administration section looks like?
I've been there, done that.
Okay.
Got it.
Does anybody want to see that?
Been there, done that.
Okay, it's fine.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions at all? I can answer for you.
Any board, department heads? Public, we got a few in the public here. You want to ask any questions pertaining to this? Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
No problem.
We've got auditors here. Do you guys need a projector for anything, or? No. Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you guys. Next, we have highlights of the 2013 audit, and we have Brad and Bill. I was going to say from Condon and Associates, but Whitfield?
Whitley, very good.
Thank you. Gentlemen, if you could come forward.
I'd like to first thank the mayor and the treasurer and the village staff for all their help and their assistance with the audit. It was very helpful, and we appreciate it very much. I'm going to highlight what I perceive as some of the more important issues from the audit, and I'm open to any questions at any time, so if I'm not clear on a point or there's a question, just stop me at that time, and also we'll have general questions at the end. I don't know if you have the actual audit report. I'll assume you don't, and just not going through specific pages, but my comments start with the general fund, which is really where most of the village money is spent and the revenues are. The general fund during this past year, which is the year ended April 30th, 2013, had revenues of $3.3 million and expenditures of $3.1 million. So there was a excess of revenue over expenses during the past fiscal year of about $200,000. So that's always good to spend less than you bring in. That general fund also has a fund balance, which is accumulated cash balances of $2.8 million, okay? And that represents between 9 months and 1 year budget. Like I said, you know, last year you spent $3.1 million and your cash balance is 2.8. So that's a good, a strong indication of financial strength. The other fund balances, your special revenue funds, and I've excluded the TIF funds in these comments because the TIF funds are really, that money's spoken for specific projects within the TIF districts. But those other fund balances for these special funds, their fund balances total about $1.5 million. So again, that's resources that the village has within those funds, unspent. Moving on to what we call proprietary funds, which are the water and sewer fund and the garbage funds. The fees charged are about equal to the costs. So the fees from the water and sewer charges and the garbage fees were about $1.4 million during the year. $1 million were water charges, about $400,000 were garbage fees, garbage collection fees. As I said, the expenditures were almost exactly equal to that. I think they're actually $100,000 more. I'm sorry, the revenues were $100,000 more than the expenditures. And that's when I look at those proprietary type funds, you always like to see that the appropriate level of charge related to the expenditures, and I think that's being done in this case. So these funds also have cash balances of about $800,000. So again, that's another indication of financial strength. And just as a point of comment here, when we look at these funds, the total infrastructure costs, this is just more a comment than anything, the village has cumulatively invested about $8 million in its water system. And we, accounting principles require depreciation of that. It's depreciated down to about $5.6 million. So that's the village's investment in its water plant, okay? And we have this infrastructure. I think some of it's on a 30-year life and some of it's on a 50-year life. So there's certainly long-lived assets. But with any type of infrastructure, things break and things wear out. And I just make the comment that, and I'm sure you are doing this, but we need to be cognizant of future capital expenditures that will be needed in these areas. So, regarding the debt of the village, okay, the village bonded debt is $5.4 million. Okay, that's a reduction of $800,000 from the prior year. And then there's a scheduled principal reduction of $800,000 during the year that we're in right now. The village has capacity for more general obligation debt. It's called a legal debt margin, and that's about $2.5 million. So that's just, again, another comment I thought.
$2.5 million, sir, as of when?
As of April 30th, 13.
Okay, so if we reduce that by $800,000 this year, it would become 3.3?
Well, it's not quite that simple. It's formula driven, and it's based upon the village's estimate or assessed valuation also.
Okay.
So you got to look at that too.
So what's the net effect of reduction of $800,000 or $800,000 on that.
Your first comment is correct, that if nothing else changes and we reduce the existing debt by 800,000, that would free up 800,000 more debt. More bonding capacity. The village was required by law, by statute, to form a police pension fund once a population is above 5,000. There's a requirement there. And the police pension fund has approximately $437,000 of assets. Okay, so that's good. During the current year, again, the year ended April 30th, 2013, there was a contribution made to that fund of $142,000. However, the actuarial calculations show that the village will have to put in at least $1.5 million to fully fund that police pension fund. Now, you have some time to do that. I think you have somewhere between 25 and 30 years to get that fully funded. The actuary that the villages use gives suggestions each year as to what a specific level of contribution can be, and that's your decision if you want to fund the absolute minimum or maybe put in a little bit extra. So that's, again, your decision, your thought process. To kind of maybe recap.
Excuse me, what is the suggested contribution, do you have that figure, suggested contribution for this coming fiscal year?
167,000.
167?
And it was just redone for the new, for the updated payroll, and it jumped up to 180,000.
So it's 180 now?
Well, yeah, yes. For the new actuarial.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just members of the public always have these figures. You gotta be, we really gotta be involved.
Yeah. To kind of recap, just two concerns, and I mentioned one already, is just the infrastructure that, you know, with your streets and your water, you want to be aware that there's always planning needed there for improvements. And the other concern is that the assessed valuation for the village has dropped. Just to give you some numbers, for the 2011 tax year, the assessed valuation was $104 million, and that next year, the 2012 year, it dropped to $92 million. So it dropped from $104 million down to $92 million.
And what's included in the valuation?
All the property within the village limits.
Yes.
Residential and commercial?
Yes.
Yes. And industrial?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not just, to clarify, property owned by the village.
No. This is, when you look at your tax bill and the assessed valuation is on there, if everyone in the village, that total was added up, these are the numbers here.
This is the basis for our tax revenue.
This is the basis for your tax revenue. Okay. So,
We can expect to bring less revenue next year.
well,
Upon those
But then
circumstances.
the manufacturer gets incremental.
right, yeah. You levy certain dollar amounts, okay? Then based upon the assessed valuation, the tax rate changes for the math to work, okay?
How are we with our levies, you know, are we close to the limit?
I mean, as far as when you ask for a 5% increase, you mean?
I think we asked for 4.999.
So I believe that was done so that we wouldn't have to take it to the public. We could have gotten more if we wanted to.
Well, I'm just asking, how are we asking?
Yeah, I guess I'm not, the comment that it's well within your authority to stay below the limit, so you don't have to, have public comment or go to the public, but the levies are driven by what your budgets are. If as part of the budget process, you determine that you need this many dollars, and that's how many dollars you need to levy. Okay. Anything, Brad, I forgot or you wanted to point out? Okay. All right. We always issue as part of the audit in what's called an internal control letter. And that internal control letter talks about improvements within the village operations to improve internal controls and potentially any errors or irregularities. And villages of the size of Monee are always faced with what we call segregation of duties, that there's not enough village officials to always split the responsibilities among people to have checks and balances on each other, okay? And again, it's not unusual at all, and it's, you know, as a village trustee, you have to consider your fiscal financial responsibilities, and we say we can't hire 10 people so we can split all these duties, so there's no, you know, so there's an absolute best segregation of duties. So, you know, we think that the village is doing a good job with the people that it has of segregating incompatible duties, okay? We commented that there's maybe a couple things that maybe the treasurer or other village staff can do, and they're going to implement those. But again, there's nothing major in that point. And we also suggested that the need for a procedure manual and a potential code of conduct that could be adopted. Those were the major points in our letter. So.
And the entire audit and that letter is available for all of us to review.
Yes.
Thank you.
As far as, and I know we have a relatively new finance director, so there's a little bit of getting acclimated and all that as well. But did you guys also identify, I know just meeting with Daryl a little bit recently on some things, the chart of accounts seems to not be as fluid as it should be as far as the groupings by the fund, department, and account numbers and such like that, because the database we use, the internal database, has limitations on its ability to report non-contiguous types of accounts. And so Daryl and I were talking, is that something you can actually help us navigate a realignment of some of those to make it?
Yes, yeah, we can help you with that.
Because I know we had a lot of journal entries that were being done just to, and it was a little overwhelming to see how much adjustments were being made.
Well, and we can talk about this in more detail, but a lot of the journal entries were what I'd call year-end adjustments, okay? There were some reclassifications, and to the extent that with moving some things around the chart of accounts, we can eliminate those reclassification, and again, with working with Daryl or the other staff all year, we want to work towards having those adjustments be made more timely so we don't have to make them within the audit.
Sure,
So.
sure. I know, like, just when Daryl and I just ran into one that was an accounts payable that showed up as an expense account by type.
Okay.
You know, little things like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, we can, we'll be glad to help the village with those type of problems.
standardization, whatever's best practices and all that, so.
Sure.
Any more comments questions from do the board or any of the department heads have questions for the auditors, or Norb or Daryl, do you specifically have anything extra you'd like to ask them? Okay. So a copy of that report is available. It should be a public document at this point. And so we can probably make that at least as a PDF and post it if we need to, I guess. But by all means, the trustees expect to have full review of that. And if they have questions pertaining to the specifics and they need a little bit of assistance understanding it.
Yeah, glad to walk through it, answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
Anybody else, or are we good on?
All right. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right.
So you guys, overnight, you guys went from 100 to 400 or 500 CPUs?
Yeah, basically, yeah. We merged with a larger firm effective January 1.
What's the name of your company now?
WIPFLI.
You have to spell it.
Yep, WIPFLI. I did one with cards.
Oh, there you go.
So,
Thank you. Whipfully, is that somebody's name?
Yes.
Clarence WIPFLI founded this
It's
firm
not-
80
it's not
80
an
years
acronym.
ago.
It's not an
It's not an acronym, it's a gentleman's name that founded the firm about 80 years
Is that a
ago.
Dutch, is that a Dutch name?
I don't know.
What's you call it? Oh, he's not on it.
Well, I would assume, trustee Horne, that these would very much like an attorney charged by the hour when he called.
Yeah, limiting phone calls to concise, thank you so much. Okay, next on the agenda is a review of the current budget. Brad? Sorry, Brad, Dylan. If you don't mind, if it's possible, since we're gonna be reviewing the budget, I don't know if you feel like staying just a little bit longer. Just to see if we have any.
Yeah, any questions? Yeah, that'd be good.
That might be when we start uncovering some questions. and whatnot. Okay. For those of you that haven't had a chance to meet Daryl Boliner, our new finance director, I gotta say, he's been charming and a lot of fun to have in the front office, even though this is about all we see of him on a regular basis.
Not anymore, we have a bigger round.
But it's good to have the right people in the right places, so. Daryl, proceed.
All right, how's everyone doing tonight? I'm just going to quickly go through some accounting type of issues. One of the first things I want to talk about is the difference between accrual-based accounting and cash-based accounting. In the past, the village has been working on a cash-based accounting type of system, which means basically you book an entry, and as soon as you pay the cash, that's when it's recognized in the budget. So basically, if you all have the budget, when you did your budgeting, it was based on the premise that, you know, when we send the cash out, that's when that expense is going to hit our budget. And then that'll let us know that, you know, we paid that item out and we have an expense there. The flip side of that, you have an accrual-based accounting, which is, in general practice, generally accepted accounting principle. It's accepted amongst the professionals in the field. That's usually how it's supposed to be recognized. And when I got here, one of the first things that I did was called up Locus, and I wanted them to activate the accounts payable module within the system so that we could use accrual-based accounting. Now, what that does is, when I'll give an example. When I put in an invoice, or if someone goes out and makes a purchase, there's no reflection of that until the invoice comes back to us. At that time, when I put the invoice in the system, that hits an expense account, that also hits a payable account. No cash is going out, but that will be reflected in the budget as an expense item. Even though we haven't put the cash out there, it does reflect in the expense account. However, say for instance, I don't actually pay that until the following month. It's already been in the expense account, now the cash is leaving. So that's a timing difference that you have between a cash-based accounting system and a accrual-based accounting system. That in one area it can be expensed in January, in one area it can be expensed in February. In the cash basis, when I paid it in February, that's when it would have been expensed and been recognized on the budget. Also, I wanted to kind of go through the chart of accounts and how it's set up so that you all understand that but I think there's 2 digits, I'm sorry.
Let me ask a question back to the auditors who are still here. The 2013 audited numbers that we just talked about, were those done on a cash basis?
No, you have, your financial statements are on the accrual,
Right.
which is a generally accepted accounting.
Okay. No, I understand.
They're on, so reflect a lot of, almost in the same way you'd see a company, their financial statements,
Okay.
right?
But to clarify, just so we engage that, in the system itself that's maintained here, it was operating on not
Correct.
consistent with the way municipalities are supposed to
Correct.
maintain their data.
Correct. For all intents and purposes, the information that was flowing, that flows through your accounting system is almost entirely cash-based.
Well, that's what you were just saying.
Yes.
But the audited results we're looking
Yes.
at here were
Or
done
on
on a
accrual
cash
basis.
basis.
Accrual basis.
Well, it's like Bill was touching on a little bit, there's a lot of adjustments that went in to
Understand.
change it, convert it from cash.
Yeah.
And
They're
that's,
done on accrual.
and that's why we have converted over to the accrual basis, so at the end of the year, there won't be that many adjusting entries, hopefully.
And it'll make it easier when you're doing periodic reports, so that we have a better idea where we're at.
Correct.
And just to touch on this, the deficiency we run into, I know you guys got a draft of a summary for some of the funds and all that, but the difficulty we run into when you're doing it is if you're running a business, you invoice people and you know what's due you, so your accrual basis, if you're running your business that way, is great, because you know exactly what's due you. The problem we run into with the municipality is we don't always know what the state owes us until they pay us. And so it's hard for us to know exactly what's really due us for a period until we've actually received notification and ultimately payment. So that's what, so even when you're looking at December's numbers, it's not, help me out, Darryl.
Yeah, that's, what we're probably running currently is more of a modified accrual system. Modified in the essence of the way we're doing is, we're basically accruing for the expenses. But on the revenue side of things, we basically can't put a receivable in there because we don't know the amount and when to expect that amount coming back from the Treasury, Will County Treasury. So it's kind of difficult to pinpoint how much revenue that's going to be and then when it's going to come in. Now, looking at the audit, I know that typically they go 60 days out based on the revenue that's coming in within that 60-day period. So with that being said, I know that, you know, the checks that we're getting in currently, we noticed that in October we received in January we received a payment that was for October. So it seems to be consistent with what they're, you know, the way it's been ideally done in the past, that revenue is going to be collected 60 days out.
Well, when you put that in the system, just for everybody to understand, when you put that in the system and it's for October, you putting it back in October's numbers?
No. Technically, when you're doing an accounting system, monthly you're supposed to be doing a monthly close. And when that close is done, it's done. That's final.
So should we not, and I'm asking also the auditors here, should we postpone closing a month until we're pretty confident that we've received what we need to? Or?
I would probably recommend not doing it that way, because
Not the way most people do it.
Right.
I understand, but I just want to make sure because, just want to make sure that we got clarification from the auditors on that.
yeah.
Typically,
Yeah, I think the way Daryl's doing it is ideal, because otherwise it'd be 2 months later before you ever get that.
Or sometimes the mistake could be 6 months later.
Or it
whatever
could
else.
be, right, there could be some old receivable out there, so you'd almost never be.
and with that being said, if we were to go back and post something in there, it would change what's come along since then. So a report that you saw 2 months ago, if you go back and post it to that account, it's going to reflect, and then it's going to be a discrepancy between what you're seeing now and what you would have seen had you left it alone. So you post it in the current.
So when you're looking at, I guess what I'm saying then, so when we're looking at, say, the sales tax revenue from the state, you can't necessarily assume because it was put in January, that it was the January transactions, it could have actually been October.
Correct. Correct.
So therefore, you're not going to look to see the Christmas spending, if you will,
Exactly.
until March.
So all the revenue from that, or
Yeah, right.
so yeah,
So,
that's correct.
all right, just want to clarify so we know.
The states always maintain the pay patterns they have now, correct?
That is correct.
So just statistically speaking, you would expect them to be similar unless there was a major change or something.
Yeah.
Depends on who's in office down there.
Same thing here. So, back to, by the way, thank you, you spent a lot of time with me, and I appreciate you doing that.
Oh, no problem at all.
Thanks for understanding, I think a little better because of that. So, back to the issue, for example, when they were talking about the difference in the evaluation of real estate property, the drop. It should be fairly simple for us to be able to predict the revenue based upon statistical analysis. The models, I'm sure.
That's probably going outside of what I what I want to speak on at this moment, but
Okay, okay. But, I mean, you're going to have to come up with the revenue for the month of January,
yeah,
let's say.
when you do your budgeting, I mean, that comes into play. I suppose when you look at your valuations, you're basing your revenue based on the valuations that you have in front of you at the time.
But here, a comment is, Daryl's doing, has a great suggestion on the expense side, okay? That if an expense is incurred, it's recorded in the information you're receiving, okay?
Correct.
Whether it's paid or not.
Correct.
So the account's paid, and that's working very good.
Yep, absolutely.
On the revenue side, and I'll give you a couple examples, okay? State sales tax or motor fuel tax, okay? There's no way to accurately predict for the month of, for what's that total gonna be for the month of January? I mean, Daryl and everyone, we can estimate, give our best estimate, and we think it's gonna be $15,000, let's say. And we can look at prior month's trends and come up with a number of $15,000. When we actually get the check, it may be for $18,000, it may be for $12,000. And there's not information available to actually to specify with that sufficient detail. So on the revenue side, we're saying, let's just stay on the cash basis. And when we get the check, it comes in, we're potentially understating our revenue, which is conservative. And at the end of the year, we'll get it caught up. But on the expense side, we're right up to date. If an expense has been incurred, it's in the information you have. Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because the amount of time it would take to speculate is not.
And then you gotta clean it all up.
And you gotta look at the economic data, and it's like,
Yeah, it's not worth the predictive time that it would take to do that, other than if we were to get a report from the state saying this is what you got coming, even though you're not gonna get it for 5 months.
Right.
It's better for us to just acknowledge if we're short on revenue, and we know, and we can simply ask you, what's the, how far back are they? So,
Yeah.
Daryl, so using the cash basis on the
receivables.
receivables, is this a stopgap measure? Is this something we're doing this for this year, and then as we get things more lined up, or is this the way we're doing it?
As far as revenue goes, this is probably the way it's going to be done, because you can't estimate it accurately enough. It would be misleading in some circumstances, and in others, you'd be selling yourself short.
So conceptually speaking, come April 30th, the expense portion will very well know.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point, we may not receive the bill, but we would have known to spend.
That's correct.
But what I hear you saying, if we stay on the cash basis on the revenue side, it'll be 2 months after that before we really know what our revenue is.
Or more.
It's true.
Makes it pretty difficult to close the books.
Well, you can close a book. I mean, based on the valuations, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have somewhat of an estimate of what you're going to collect.
At least in the property taxes, right?
Right.
I know where you're going, so be careful, because I'm going to come right back at you.
That's fine. I'm not. But
Nice with the curveballs then.
I am. No, I'm.
If real estate taxes are estimatable,
Right.
and you know somewhat what you should be getting at the end of the year, you can probably book an estimate as a receivable of what you should get in the next 60 days.
Yeah.
And that's a receivable at that point, and you can close your books at that point. When that revenue comes in, like I've seen in June, July, you book against that receivable, and you put in your cash. That's how you handle that situation.
And adjusting for a property tax receivable is a very common adjustment with any government client that they typically make on an annual basis. Because the amount of time that it would take to do that every month, the benefit's not gonna be there. Because usually at the end of the year, it's one estimate that you're making at the end of the year. So usually, the biggest change, the only real impact on your revenue that's different from doing on an accrual basis, just take property taxes, for example. The only real difference between the property tax revenue on a cash basis and accrual basis is your change in your receivable from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. That difference between whatever that amount is, which is really what you collected in the first 60 days after the close of that year, that's really the net effect on revenue.
And ultimately, that's an important factor because of the need potentially for levies in the coming year. Of course, it's the sales tax and other variables we have from the state, be it income tax portions and all that kind of stuff. Those are different because that's not regulated by us as much as the property taxes are.
Darryl, just for clarification, so really the easy estimate or the easy revenue income is property tax because the county is very efficient in getting our taxes collected, number one, and dispersed within our fiscal year. Right. And our rate of non-collected taxes is very low as it pertains to property tax. The real variable here is our other revenue sources, such as the state sales tax, the motor fuel tax dollars, things of those nature, that historically have lagged behind 2 to 3 months. Right. At one point, they were more than that, but of recent, they've been 2 to 3 months behind. Those are the ones on the revenue side that really are problematic. And the real reason that you, on the accrual basis, go out for 2 months to capture that revenue in the current fiscal year.
Sure, and I think on the receivable side, the only relevant receivable for you guys that would be beneficial to have monthly accruals is your water and sewer stuff, right? Because you know what that receivable is when you're billing your customers.
Right.
I wanted to go through the chart of accounts so that you all understand how the chart of accounts is set up and what each number stands for. It's set up as a 01 or 02, 00, and then a 3-digit number, in some cases 3-digit number, point something. It's important to understand that because we need to differentiate between the different funds that we have. 01 being corporate general fund, 02, and I don't have these memorized myself, road and bridge, 3 being MFT. And I want to go back to the general fund because in this one, within that fund, you have different departments. And within those departments, they have their own little, expenses associated with them. So if everyone has a budget, as far as the trustees, I believe I gave you all the binder with the budget in it. The first page being, and I went over this with some of the trustees that came in, so this will probably sound familiar to them. We just kind of went through what each area was. For instance, 0100, which is Fund 1, 00 being a general type of or administration type of department. And we basically went through and we looked at the revenues and the expenses. And I don't know if I need to do this, but for each department within that fund, there's revenues and then there's expenses. In some cases, general may make a profit, in others there's a deficit, but in some cases you have departments that do not generate revenue. DJ, I don't mean to pick on you, but Road and Bridge is one that you know, they're not expected to pick revenue, so of course they're gonna have a deficit because you do have employees there and purchases that they need to do to make to perform their jobs. So, I mean, in that instance, you're gonna have a deficit in a particular area, and there's really not much you can do about that to circumvent it. However, as a whole, the village as a whole, that takes into account all of the funds. And to really understand where the village is at that point, you need to understand that as a whole, those are all combined. And then you have to, you know, when you get into the property that the village owns and things of that nature, that's an asset that, you know, correct. Purchases that are made, maybe capital assets at that time that may be an expense going out, but it's helping increase the value of the village as a whole. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that, you know, you're going to have a department that has a deficit because they're not put there to create revenue. So they're there to do a service. Yes.
Mayor, if I could, it's a very good example if you look at your budget that has 01-21. Chief, sorry to pick on the police department, but their only source of revenues are very limited. It's property tax, and it's revenues generated, you know, by fines, some donations, and things of that nature. But that is one that is incorporated. It's a department in the corporate fund, because corporate has to subsidize the police department for its operation. It's historically, that is how that's done. I can't answer why, but probably because you would eat up all of your tax levy. If you levied enough to operate the police department, you wouldn't have anything left for discretionary spending in the corporate fund itself. In the administration portion of the corporate fund. So that's one department that directly ties back to your tax levy. Yes, they receive property taxes as part of the tax levy, but it's not intended, nor is it near enough to operate the department. Another one is the road and bridge fund. You know, really their only revenue is certainly some motor fuel tax dollars, which is in a different fund, but it's you know, tax levy dollars that come in for road and bridge and vehicle stickers, and those are about the minimal funds there. So it's very difficult not to operate at a deficit with those.
That's correct. Heard the mention of vehicle stickers, and I want to jump to that because that kind of hinges on the accrual-based accounting issue. Currently, the villages had issued the issuance of a 2-year sticker. With that, I realize that we're recognizing revenue that technically will have to be reported as deferred revenue going forward because exactly, it's for next year. It's not for the current year, so we will have to defer that revenue, and that will be something that affects the budget because currently it's showing that it's revenue, and once an adjustment is made, that revenue is going to be taken out and it's going to be placed in a deferred revenue account, which is on the balance sheet, and you know it's not going to reflect in the budget.
Yeah, last year, we're not gonna get it this year.
That's pretty much what I wanted to say, but I wanted to make sure that.
If I could just ask this, so there's some things, and I'll refer to the auditors as well. In the last few years, there's been an expectation for things like depreciation of assets and things like that as part of our books. Currently, we don't even have an inventory of our assets per se, our buildings we know we have as far as physical property, real estate, but not necessarily any of our other assets. Is that something that really should be part of our books, if you will, as well?
That's a good procedure. Not even just government clients, not many private business clients do. I don't think they do.
an inventory of fixed assets is a good idea.
And a depreciation schedule is now a requirement of municipalities, I believe, is that correct?
We have a depreciation schedule that lists 100 items or,
Right,
and we shared it with their.
I do have it.
Because I believe there's a module within your
Yep.
system to track that stuff.
We recently had that module open through Locust. I've looked at it and it's fine. I haven't had a chance to get in there and put in our fixed assets, but I do have a spreadsheet from the accountants here, and that is on the list of things to do.
Okay. Okay.
Also, I believe everyone has, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but you need to comment on this, on how it ties together. Superintendent Griselle and myself have been meeting to get a program together that will, through an outside company, that will help locate our valves, our infrastructure. Once that is done and placed on maps, that is information that can be loaded into the module for Gatsby 34, you know, as assets. And that will reflect, have a better or truer reflection of actually what we have, because assets are not always visible. You know, there's a lot of assets that we have that are in the ground, and that is one of the programs that will help feed the correct information toward that.
The mayor and I, we worked on a spreadsheet, and we're trying to get to a point where on a monthly basis we can report valuable information back to the village. And one of them being, I don't know if you all received a spreadsheet here, but what that spreadsheet does is it's a listing of month-to-month expenses that we have by fund, what we expect that amount to be at the end of the fiscal year, as well as the percentage of usage. It's a work in progress. It's just something that we wanted to get out there and show that you know, we're trying to get some procedures together as far as a monthly set of reporting guides to issue out to everyone, and this is just the start of it. I think you all have the summary information behind it as well, which you can look at your leisure. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me, and you know, I can give you any information that you need. Yes.
You asked for this. So unfortunately, I was given this right before the meeting tonight, so I didn't have time to go through it. Our mayor has time to work on web pages and accounting. I don't know how you ever go home at all.
My car started at 2:30.
So a couple of questions. Looking at the summary fund report, thank you for getting that for me today.
No problem.
That's where things start to get interesting for me. So I'm going to have to help in my ignorance. There's another source that showed up at $517,000. Makes all the difference between a budget that's in deficit and a budget that's no longer in deficit. Help me out.
Okay.
What line is that? Where are you referring to?
Summary fund report that was passed out just a minute ago. Did you give us that?
Which account number? Which fund?
Very corporate fund, very top one.
You're talking about the big sheet?
Single page by itself, summary report, it says,
One show hands.
all by itself.
It's a checkbook, basically.
I knew this question was coming,
Of
actually.
course you did. You know, yeah, go ahead.
I've stated that we are currently working on reconciling all the balance sheet accounts.
Okay.
With that being said, we can't say that this is absolutely the Bible here. What I will say is that we are working on reconciling every account. And when we're done with that, this sheet will be more important than anything I did give you. However,
That I already knew. Where did the $517,000?
those are transfers in and out,
From where?
different funds.
Specifically, yes.
Are you asking specifically?
Well, there's a plus, there's a minus. You just added $517,000 I don't see a minus offsetting it.
Well, like I said, I'm working on the chart of accounts. There's some things that need to be straightened out. I'm getting there.
Can I interject for a second?
Mhm.
Some of the things we discovered, Trustee Olson, and this is what I was asking the auditors about as well. There are a slew of transfer accounts that are in the chart of accounts, and some of them are not even associated correctly as the proper type of account. There are some that was like an accounts receivable.
You had an accounts payable.
Accounts payable account that was actually an expense account. We had others that were, I'm just saying, so some of these are, unfortunately, the account types that are in there need to be corrected, no question about it. So, Daryl, do you believe this to be
Yeah,
more accurate than this, based on what you...
I do, because for the most part, we were able to use Excel spreadsheet and
Isolate.
yeah, kind of isolate the problems that were in the system. I know if you look at Fund 3 within the budget, there's an accounts payable line there that shouldn't be there. I have actually had Locust come in and change that account. He had to go behind the scenes due to the fact that when you have activity in an account, it makes it very difficult to change that account because you don't want to lose the history. However, you know, he was able to go behind the scenes and do that for me. In some instances, I will be able to create a new account and simply do a journal entry to correct the issue. But with a liability account, sometimes it becomes very difficult to do that because you've got so much history.
I'm still confused. When we have auditors here who said our audit at the end of last year said everything was reported the way it should be, and in the space of 8 months, we have $500,000, we don't know where it came from.
The auditors had adjusting journal entries.
I'll make a comment, and this is just a supposition, I don't know this, but there is a bank account at Amalgamated Bank related to your TIF money that I don't think that information is being recorded in your books currently. And that Amalgamated Bank transfers money to the general fund to help pay some of your bonded debt. I don't know for sure that that's what this $500,000 or part of this is, but that could be why you don't see a corresponding reduction someplace else, because that Amalgamated Bank activity is not recorded yet. I mean, it's all fine, and Daryl's working on improving that. And maybe I'm off base too, but that's just something that came to mind.
There is an amalgamated on the GL inside,
okay.
So.
Yeah.
And
But
we
there's
do
activity
make
there, but there are transfers.
That is
Yeah.
correct, yes.
Yeah. That's a possibility, and I don't know if that's, but I have every confidence that it'll be found and reported on, soon.
We're trying to get the back end correct, so we don't have to rely on external spreadsheets, because I don't like external spreadsheets as much, because there's potential for massaging data, and I don't like that. The purpose of doing this, just like the adjusting entries at the end of the year, in order to get the audit done correctly. The point is I don't like that, Daryl doesn't like it, I'm sure the auditors don't like it. Point we have to deal with is we need to be able to put the information in front of the trustees and the public on a regular basis. That's our goal. The system currently in place, Locust, may not be the best program in the world, but there's not a lot of good programs out there for municipalities. But the point is, we need to correct the system we have and get the chart of accounts. You know, we're asking for help from the auditors defining and correcting the account types and everything else. There's a limitation to what they're able to directly help us with as the auditors. They will also want to be coming in and tell us how to do the day-to-day operations of that, but they can help us with best practices and help us realign those things, and we're going to put pressure on Lucas. Daryl's done a pretty good job so far getting them to correct the anomalies in the system. And let's just be, without casting any aspersions on previous personnel, et cetera. The reality is, this is the first time the Village of Monee's ever had a finance director per se. That's a good step towards making sure we got our books in order on a regular basis. There's a lot of people that have been stuck in positions by default, not by necessarily proper training or skill sets or whatever else. We need to be in a position to make sure that we're putting the right people in the right places so that they can each reach their optimal performance within the village. Daryl being in this position has taken the bull by the horns in this short amount of time he's been here, and we're making those corrective measures. Trust me, I'm not thrilled about the fact that I can't ask Daryl for a report and get it immediately. That's correct. I'm not thrilled about that at all. We need to take steps necessary. Should have been doing this a long time ago, but we need to be doing that now because now that we're fully aware of that, Trustee Olson, spot on. I don't like this either. You know, and if there's an explanation for it, it's the same thing that Norm, when you and I walked into the preparation of the treasurer's report, tell me I didn't blow a gasket.
Yeah.
The system.
Well, I'd like for someone to clarify, are we talking about something here that existed before May 1st of last year? And I'm asking the auditors this question. And you gave us an audited report. Are we saying that this $500,000 has occurred since then? Or was this in existence as of May 1st?
When we did our audit as of April 30th, 2013, we balanced all the transfers between funds, and they balanced out exactly to the dollar. So this would be subsequent to our audit.
But to clarify,
But
you weren't able to do that directly out of the system initially.
yes,
You had to do the corrective adjustments in order to get the system to correctly reflect.
so that they would balance. Yeah, that the negative and the positives would equal zero.
We had,
What it is, and I think, again, there's just information that needs to be recorded in the books, and then that'll balance.
And that'll come along with reconciling accounts.
Daryl, give an example. When Norm and I were meeting with a situation, we had a situation came up with, and it was right when you first started, or right about just shortly after, where we had a situation where a vendor payment or something like that needed to be put in a correct account, and a journal entry needed to be made. But we never realized, because Locust never told us their system was capable of associating that adjustment to a vendor at the same time. So you actually have your transaction detail correctly reflecting the association to a client, vendor, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, in the treasury report, it lists the vendors and the amounts paid to each vendor. Well, what was happening was if there was a correction that needed to be made to a vendor and a journal entry needed to be made, if that vendor wasn't attached to that journal entry, then it wouldn't reflect in the treasury report. So you'd have a number in the treasury report with all these vendors, but it would be missing these amounts that were done through a journal entry. We actually found out that you can attach that journal entry to the vendor, and then that would also reflect in the treasury report.
And I'm assuming that the report that you're all looking at, I'm assuming that's for the current year?
That is for the current
So
year,
to address his question, that information that's flowing through that report is not covered by our audit. That would be stuff.
Just verifying.
Yep. And I think that should really address that question.
Yep.
So I have a question here. I appreciate the work you're doing, and I agree with, you're jumping into some things that need to be incorporated into best practices. So we have a budget coming up. End of the year is April 30th. Next is May 1. So how, if we're missing, we just found in quotes $500,000, how can we put together a budget knowledgeably, not knowing where this is coming from? So I know you're working on that. So do you have a timeline where you can say, this is where, be it a month or 2 months, this is where the money came from?
my timeline to have all the bank reconciliations done, balance sheet accounts done, it's the second board meeting in February. And I want you all to understand that there's still day-to-day things going on. That's why it's not done now. I wanted it done now. But it's a lot of day-to-day activity going on. No excuse, but you know, there's a lot of accounts that need to be reconciled. We're talking about accounts that have never been technically in the books reconciled. So it needs to be done.
And just to clarify, this is a fund balance with a summary. For the purposes of budgeting, the fund balance is not as relevant to the budgeting aspect as the revenue and the expense expectations, which is documented on this sheet, which is just a summary of that. This is more for the general, each fund, not even broken down by department here, is it? No, this is just general funds.
Yeah, just the general
Each of the
summary.
funds.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Agree, Mr. Mayor. You know, I'm just a country boy here. Put that hat on for a second. I clown sometimes, people might even say.
Where's the picture?
But if I have a checkbook with a $1,000 balance, and all of a sudden my wife comes up to me and says, "Oh, honey, I got news for you. We got $110,000 in our bank." I'm not gonna go out and start writing checks.
Thank you. Understood.
so, just to follow up, if I may, like, for instance, let's take this amalgamated bank account that is out there. Do we have plans, are we going to move that over to First Midwest? Are we keeping that as amalgamated, or what's the plans for that account specifically?
I think Larry will address it.
If I may, I believe it was under a bond ordinance, and they were a trustee, amalgamated.
Okay.
And for the last, I would say, 15 years, they've been our trustee. So I think the bond ordinance, when we passed it, the GO bonds and TIP bonds, they were named as trustee.
Okay.
And sometimes with bond deals, the bond issuer will want to know the capability or the assets of the trustee. So there's limits that you can nominate.
Trustee Horne, additionally, what takes place in amalgamated is booked in our system so that we know what's going on. And that hasn't always been the case, but it is booked in our system, even though the trustees actually take the action. But, and to pay the bonds, Larry, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and Daryl, but amalgamated pays the bonds, and any portion of those bonds, if there is a portion of those bonds that is the municipal responsibility, not the TIF responsibility, we transfer money to amalgamated so that that payment is made correctly.
Okay.
I want to ask Daryl and then our auditors as well. So when you look at this summary sheet, and you got the details on the 7-page additional document there, that's the details, and this is just simply a summary by fund and department. DJ, can you share a copy of that with? And when you look at the first line per fund and then by department, you'll notice that in the first column there, if you will, it says monthly budget. That's just a 12th of the annual budget. And that's just so you have an idea of what the potential is per month based on a trend. But when you look at the monthly budget or you look at the annual budget, the third column from the right, you'll notice that there's the expense and the revenue budgeted do not line up. Or at least even on the total. So if you look underneath, let's say for all of the general fund for 0, 1, and then you see it says gain loss. We were actually budgeting for monthly loss of, what, $67,000 according to the way the budget was written, Daryl? Is that correct for the 01 fund?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So the question I have, and I just want to make sure that the board is aware of, so we understand this when we get into the budgeting process, and Daryl or the auditors as well, this is not what is referred to as a balanced budget, where you would actually deliberately anticipate your revenues and expenses would line up exactly?
Correct. So, definitely a deficit budget.
Right.
Where you anticipate, yeah.
And Bill or Brad, standard practices within municipalities as far as, I don't want to use the state as my pattern, but, I mean, within municipalities, is it a good idea to have a, and I know there's methods and reasons for not, but that partly is because to simplify the need to go back to the board to make an adjustment if you needed to. And I understand that, but as a best practices, what do you see taking place among other municipalities that would be recommended for our practices here?
A balanced budget is better, okay? However, if you determine that you have excess fund balances because of not spending what was budgeted in prior years, and your fund balances have built up, then you could potentially have a deficit budget. But if you always have a balanced budget, you'll never get in trouble.
And it's based on, when we're talking about the balanced budget, it's the budget. It's not necessarily what you expect. I mean, you're anticipating based on that, but you could go above or below on your revenue or expenses. You're just merely stipulating, we expect to have a certain number of dollars come in, and based on that prediction, we don't want to budget for spending above that. However, if you do need to have an increase in revenue, like, let's just pick an example here, Parks and Rec Fund, or department, our 0170 on the summary sheet. I mean, we went off the scale there. If you look at the far left side of that, our expenses were 579%. So basically, almost 6 times the predicted expenses for the year for Parks and Rec. That's because we had never
So far.
And it sounds, well, that's scary, but, and if anybody cuts off the video at this point, and they were, but then you look at the revenue, and we're like 16 times as compared to, well, actually, no. Well, 164 times, I should say, what our revenue was, because, so it's okay to have like that, but if we had actually been in a situation like that, and that was the budgeted reference for the department and all that, legally, do we have to go back to the board specifically to amend our budget in order to make that work? Or does it apply only to the entire fund, that you have to deal with the amendments of that sort?
What we've done in other villages, we make motions to go on record for transfer funds. That way when we do our audits, the auditors feel safe when it's on record doing it that way.
Right. Like, if you're spending more than your budget, right? So like.
Right. So we'll use Parks and Rec as an example, because it's off the charts. That's not a good thing too, just so anybody understands.
But that almost looks like that was like you must have had an event or something that didn't go into the original budget.
Right.
So
It was not anticipated.
If I was looking at that,
Right.
That's how that.
Right. Right, so the budget, just to be clear, the budget for spending for Parks and Rec was $24,000, and we spent $142,000. Now, it sounds scary until you look at the revenue, and we anticipated a revenue of only $850, and we brought in $140,000. So whereas we were anticipating a net loss of $14,000 for that department, we actually only had I just lost my line here. Pardon me. Stop. So we're only at a net loss of $2,000 instead of the anticipated $14,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think this worksheet is a work in progress, and there may be some formulas or
The summaries on that was summarizing the entire fund, not just that one department, just so when you're looking at that.
Sure, and something just to think about is how you're allocating your property tax revenue by department,
Right.
general fund,
Yeah.
right?
That was,
That's an important thing, because if it's not being allocated in the same
Correct.
percentage that you're levying it, there's the potential that some of these individual departments might be a little skewed, right? Especially if they,
that is correct.
if it's not being allocated on a monthly basis.
And we did find an issue with the allocation of that, which was corrected in January, so come February, revenue, anything that has a revenue for real estate taxes should be pretty close to the budgeted item.
And that's my point, Mr. Mayor, is that we should be talking about our expenses relative to what our budget is.
Correct.
So that when we're having meetings, our regular scheduled board meetings, we should be looking at a budget, not just at a pay sheet, number one.
Agreed.
Number two, Daryl, no dispersions upon you. I'm very comfortable with what you're doing, and I realize this timeline have to be. I'm just a little scared that if you weren't here, would we have found that $570,000? 70, excuse me, I stand correct.
That's why, Trustee Olson, that's why he's here.
I'll be quiet.
Additional comments from the auditors helping us with where we need to be and go with our, I mean, this is not necessarily to address the specifics of our next budget, but to set the tone, if you will, for what we need to correct internally to make that more fluid. So suggestions from you, online, offline, either way, is going to be helpful to us.
Yeah. You're moving in the right direction, and like one trustee asked if we can start presenting a report of budget to actual, that'll be helpful too. Each month.
That's the goal. That's the plan.
And especially when you're finalizing your budget, just really make it look, like looking at it and looking at how your actual operations are, making sure it makes sense. You know, like is what you're budgeting for the year, like how does that end up looking in comparison to what your actual results were? So making sure that, you know, if you're setting a budget, making sure that it's actually mirroring what your actual operations are, so that, you know, so the information you're looking at actually is relevant.
And you're going to do things, for instance, like public works, you're buying a lot of salt now, you're not going to need it, and, I mean, if it's part of your line item budget, you're going to see a heavy use of that December, January, you know, where you're actually buying it. But, you know, the whole year's budget of that is going to be consumed in 2 months. So, you know, some of that, you expect to have some months of no activity and other months of off the charts. As long as it all stands within the whole, you know. But I guess going back to the question I had, I just want to clarify this, if I can as well, all the experts here. When you have an adjustment that needs to take place by presenting if you expect that you're going to go above you don't have to have a board action if you're going above your revenue. That's just a wonderful thing.
Right.
But if you are going above your budgeted expense, you need to have board action to acknowledge that potential and get approval to do that. But is that by line item, or is that by department, or is that by the entire fund that we have to be concerned about the potential?
It's more important by the fund. Now, you probably are going to have line items in the budget that maybe you tweak the individual line item.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and I understand that.
For our purposes, what we're looking at is your fund in total. We're not going to necessarily look at individual line items.
Right.
That might come up when we're doing our testing and looking at expenses, and we see, you have 20 grand budgeted and you spent 100 grand. Well, that's gonna trigger some questions by us, but as long as your funding, as long as your budget in total doesn't exceed your, equals or exceeds your actual expenditures, then technically you're in budgetary compliance.
Well, if you have like the Parks and Rec area as an example, where we went real high on our revenue, so we were able to go higher on our expenses than budgeted.
Sure.
There wasn't necessarily a need to adjust anything because it didn't affect our bottom line for the entire fund. I just,
well,
from the requirement to amend the budget for the purpose of the, I just want to make sure we're all on the same
I
page.
don't think we can amend the budget once we make it, can we?
of course.
Or we can
No,
spend
I
it.
think, if I understand, as long as you balance out, I think most villages look at the fund, and there are line items that could fluctuate, but as long as you meet that fund, and don't go over the fund, I think you're okay.
Well, but I mean, it's not abnormal to spend the money from one account. It's not, but it's very abnormal to change your budget once you've established it for the next year. You usually, I would assume, keep that budget the same. You may spend an extra $20,000, but that would be purposely knowledgeable and with board consent.
But do we not have to amend the budget when we exceed an expense in a particular fund?
Not that I know.
I'm just asking to clarify that. If, let's forget about the general fund, let's just look at motor fuel tax. It's a simpler, you know, if you exceed what you anticipated for that fund in expenses, first of all, we probably wouldn't do it because we're only gonna spend what we know we actually have coming in. But let's say we didn't budget appropriately for that fund.
You need to adjust it.
We have to adjust that, and that's actually an adjustment in the budget, I believe. And we actually have to get it reapproved by the board for that to take place. It's not just simply approving an additional spending, it's actually adjusting the budget.
You're amending the budget.
Amending the budget. And that's a requirement if we, you know, in order to deal with it.
Historically, what we, I think, done before in the past, we tried to do, if we're gonna go over that budget, we put it in the minutes, so the board can take a vote on it. It's easier for the auditors to at the end of the year.
Sure.
So in case there's questions by, if another issue would be, in case you ever want to go out for bonds, the underwriters always take a look at the audited statements. And if they're off just a wee bit, they'll affect your bonds if you're able to issue bonds. So what we've done before, in other villages, along with this one, if there's going to be, it's better to be prudent and amend the budget and have it before the board.
Okay. Good.
Mr. Mayor, in discussion that plays to your subject matter here, a good example is the 0122 line item, which is, you can see beginning in May, that is probably the reason that the corporate fund was passed with a deficit, is because that 0122 line item, or fund, department rather, had a line item in there that incorporated major repairs to the police department. And that was explained, you know, at the budget time. And the auditors at the time, it was not Whitley, but suggested that was the approach to take in order to access cash that was on hand. And so that certainly plays against the revenue that was coming in. You're not going to be able to stay within your revenue projections, but it drew the expense side much higher than in a normal budgeting process. But there was one specific explanation for that. And I believe you can do that a couple of different ways. This is just the way that it was done at that time by that auditor. The other way is certainly how you alluded to.
Right, and I think in that regard, there's going to be times where we have a fund balance, and that's the reason why you can't look at this without looking at your fund balances. Because if you got a fund balance, let's say for motor fuel tax that we didn't use for a period of time, then that would explain why we had not a balanced budget for that fund, because we know we got to do repairs, we're budgeting for those repairs, our expenses are going to be higher than our anticipated revenue for that year, but we know that we're going to be drawing down our fund balance in the process of doing that. then that's okay. I understand why you don't always have a balanced budget for every fund, but the corporate fund, I would think you'd want to strive towards that being a balanced budget for the corporate fund. Not to say that if you got fund balance available, you might not want to deliberately do that for a stated reason. Another question I have pertaining to, and this is more of a chart of accounts layout, if I may. The board will notice that outside of the general fund, which is the 01 dash reference, all of your other funds, 02, 03, 04, motor fuel, garbage, audit, IMRF, whatever, those are all tagged to the 00 department, which is the general administration, village hall. The question I have is a matter of practicality. Is that okay to do it that way? It's not like it's wrong necessarily, but doesn't it make sense since water and sewer are really being dealt with through the public works department? Doesn't it make just as much sense to, I'm just asking, because with Daryl and I had this conversation, we're trying to figure out, is it more appropriate since it's always going to be administered through that department? Should that just simply, should the chart of accounts reflect the department of relevance to them?
You're saying instead of having OA, water and sewer, and just having administration, you're saying break it up between functions?
No, I'm saying like, well, you could, but I'm saying like 08-00 as a general reference to the fund and department would be probably more closely aligned with 08-22 for public works. I'm not saying.
I don't see why, whatever makes it easier for you to understand the information that's in there, right?
Just a point of clarification, does it matter one way or the other?
Not really.
Okay.
Not, I wouldn't think so.
That's fine.
Having a more specific description can't ever really hurt, right? It helps you know what it's related to, right? Like, I mean, if you had one code for all your general funds up here, that would make it a little hard to see, what's going through all those functions. So really, whatever's, I would use your judgment.
Okay, that's fine.
Are you talking about combining funds and?
No,
that's not.
I'm not talking about combining funds. I'm just talking the department reference of the account numbers should be reflective of the departments that are actually dealing with it, not necessarily administration and village hall is a general purpose department for those accounts that are tagged to a particular stated purpose. So, it's fine. Trustees, I'm delighted you guys are enjoying this.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. No, I'm not. Any more questions or comments or interaction with the finance director?
For the meeting sometime in the future, we'll have more information on where that $500,000
Well, last meeting was only 250,000, so.
Well, I feel pretty good. We were short a month ago, and Mr. Wallace is correct. Now we're $500,000 richer, so I feel much better.
Reconciliations, you find things, and I'm not going to say one way or the other if it's going to be good, if it's going to be bad. I just have to get through the reconciliations, and I have more accurate reporting.
Daryl, you're up on the next item as well. And just point of clarification, gentlemen, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to help you.
Item number G, ACH payment, option review. I know we had talked to you about the auto option, and you had further conversations with PSN.
PSN,
Sorry, go ahead, proceed.
yeah, one of the issues that was on the table was were they going to be able to waive the fee for, I guess, the fiscal equipment that we need to process payments. And during conversations with Mr. Wallace and PSN, we did find that they would waive the fee for that. Also, it turns out that Locus, our software provider, they are working with PSN, and they're making out some kind of arrangement to work together with ACHs. I've been sent 3 different quotes within the past 3-4 days, so we're kind of at a standstill with that and Locust.
So just to clarify, are they going up or down for the same items?
Well, they kind of started small and worked their way up, so, I mean, I'm still waiting to find out what the final number will be with them. I got that at the end of the day today, so I didn't get a chance to speak to anyone.
So we're not ready for a decision on it?
As far as the ACH portion with Locust, no, I don't know if...
We need more clarification from both them and PSN.
I think PSN is ready to get started. As far as the questions that we had with waiving of...
PSN's ready for the credit card stuff, but the ACH issue is still...
Well, the 2 questions that I had for them was the physical equipment, would they waive the fee, and was the ACH portion on their module, was that a straight ACH, and they seem to believe that it is. They said that it is. A person would not have to go on monthly to process that ACH. So those were the 2 questions that I had. As far as what Locust and PSN are working out together, then that seems to be the question, how they're going to work together.
And then you're still waiting for Locust to get back to you?
That's correct, yes.
Regarding the notification to the customer?
That's correct, yes.
Because as it would stand right now, you get a blue card out because without any further adjustments and any other features, the blue card would still go out, even though it's automatically being taken out of somebody's account?
Yeah, from my understanding, they would you would tag an account, and on the bill that would be issued, there would be a remark stating that payment is to be debited or credited from their account on a particular day. As far as different cards, we hadn't discussed that. It was just that a note would be put on the card.
So for the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. But we're proceeding with, it looks like we're able to proceed with PSN for the...
We could go with PSN, considering if that's going to be an option on the website, they do offer that. And they have said that ACH is full-blown and they'd be able to do that.
Okay.
So.
Any more questions for him pertaining to that? Okay. All right. Thank you, Darryl. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going to defer to Trustee Holston regarding, I know we want to engage in some conversation pertaining to economic development.
Yeah.
And if I could just mention that I've got the greatest respect for Trustee Holston's insight into manufacturing, industrial, and perspectives in those regards, the whole business base, if you will, in general, not just that. And even when I first was put into office as the mayor, I was glad that Trustee Holston was the chair of the P&Z, and I saw that as he's an asset when it comes to helping us steer our potential with economic development. So, David, if you want to address some of your goals and expectations that we need to be working towards.
I just want to, again, committee as a whole, talk about economic development as a whole. Economic development is not just industrial, it's not just commercial, it's also residential. It encompasses the whole, as the mayor and Administrator Wallace are aware of. Prior to the last meeting, I asked for each of you to be given a copy of the 2004 Economic Development Study. I don't know if that's been done yet.
The comprehensive plan, you mean?
Comprehensive plan. Mr. Wallace? I sent that one to you.
No.
Okay. Maybe we can get it for the next meeting, but that was done in 2004. My point in even getting you a copy of it was to let you see how outdated it is, and to suggest to the committee as a whole that we begin talking and putting in our budget for next year to update and present a new economic development plan for the village of Monee. If you go to a number of the websites for other villages, you can go right on their website. They'll have an economic development plan. They have a strategy. They're working with the chamber. They're working with business. Mentioned previously, Assemblers Inc. came in here for the Christmas season. They were gone right after Christmas. They're gone now to run a small part of the World Kitchen building, which is still sitting empty. There's other empty buildings in the village right now. Liberty Furniture is in the process of coming into the village. We ought to be talking with them. We ought to be talking from an economic development point of view with a strategy. And one of the things we lack right now is a strategy. And we need to develop that plan. It's not going to be inexpensive. Mr. Wallace, you may know better than I do what the cost is, but I would guess $50,000 would be a fair start.
Be right in the ballpark, you bet.
And that sounds like a lot of money until you look at what you get for it, and if you begin to look at other villages and how they're attracting that. We're spending some time and effort right now trying to do annexation. We know the Ileana is coming this way. We know that possible South Suburban Airport may be coming on. For us not to have an economic development plan right now is planning to fail. And I think we need to begin to identify company that can do that for us. I think we need to identify in the budgeting process money for that, along with capital infrastructure money to do some of the things we've talked about previously. But we need to begin to have an economic development program, and that may need to be separate from this committee. That may need to be some people, typically it's businesses, representatives of some of the major businesses in town. The Chamber of Commerce certainly would play a part of that. The village should play a part of that, both the maybe one or two government officials, as well as specifically some of the staff of the village need to be intimately involved in this. I've attended over the last several months, several meetings. The last one was South Holland, South Village, excuse me, last week. I've gone to South Holland. I've gone on to some additional web pages. There's some towns that are doing a really good job of bringing in business right now, either commercial business, industrial business, and residential. We've got a lot of opportunity in Monee. We're positioned right for the future, but without an economic development plan and then executing that plan, I think we're in trouble. And the plan that was put together in 2004 is outdated completely. In fact, it doesn't use the word industrial at all. It talks about commercial and residential only. And the industry is a big part of our community here, a big part of economic development, but so is residential and so is commercial. And we need to put together something for that. So I think the first place to start is to recognize we need to do that, ask the administration to come up with some recommendations for an economic development study and or plan. We could certainly use the last people we used, but we certainly ought to go out and look at other options. A number of villages our size, and I'm talking about villages the size of Monee, that are doing an outstanding job. They all have economic development plans that are current.
Right, and I know I'm just getting sign language from one of our department heads, but 2004 was the last comprehensive plan, but there's a 2009 West Sector framework that was an addendum to that. But even at that, it's basically everything that's at 57. I think that was adjusted perhaps because of the Aqua agreements being in play, because we were limited prior to that.
Well, most villages have those plans on their web pages. I don't believe the trustees, from the look on your faces, any of you have them. And so I think we need to start with what we have right now, but probably we're going to want to very quickly move into a future planning mode and determine how we want to handle economic development. It needs to be more than a discussion item. It needs to be an actively involved, engaged. Every time Lee Boswell over at the Chamber of Commerce has told me he gets several calls a month from companies that are interested. It's going to him, and that's all that happens to it sometimes. Or maybe it's a casual call over here. We need to have an organized approach if we want to be a player in the game.
I did, at a meeting I recently went to with some of the staff, I had the opportunity to meet with Congresswoman Kelly and told her that because of the, especially with the airport and the Ileana, that we were going to need some assistance on funding some of that. So while you're talking about $50,000, she was very quick to help me identify some possible sources for some of that as an underwriting of a grant for some of that. I know we've talked to the Department of Transportation. Unfortunately, the state thinks that they need to push that through the county and not necessarily locally to the municipalities that are going to be impacted. But in talking to the Congresswoman, she indicated that CMAP might even be a good choice of funding for some of that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I did check with CMAP. First of all, could I please clarify that I think we're using two terms that are synonymous with the same report? Are we speaking of a comprehensive plan? Because I'll be the first to admit, I'm unfamiliar with any economic development plan specifically.
I'm referring to the comprehensive plan.
Yes, sir.
Comprehensive plan, but it does refer to that as the economic plan. I'll bring a copy to you. You don't have a copy.
Yeah, no, I have a copy of the comprehensive plan. I just wanted to be sure that we're speaking of the same.
Is there another one?
No.
Is there an economic development plan other than that?
No, that's what my question was. I
Right.
don't know of one.
Right, and I'm not aware of any either.
Exactly.
And in that regard, not because of because I was not really sure that I was aware of that, but I had asked the deputy clerk to help me locate, because I had somebody else ask me for some of those documents. And it's actually kind of enlightening if you want to. We actually found, I say we, but the deputy clerk found, not only the 2009 addendum to the 2004 comprehensive plan, but we also had the 1997, which is what was used to define our map that we currently have primarily for the commercial districts and things of that sort. But there's also a 1978 version of that. And it just, for those that like the historical aspect of the perspective from 1978 until even 2004, gives you an idea of why we are where we are. And to second, third, fourth, whatever, Trustee Holston's insistence on this is crucial to our long-range, short-range potential. And we have to take this seriously enough to not just say, well, whoever happens to show up in our town to do business, that's great. No, we have to actually be clear about who we are, what we want to accomplish, and make it, to borrow a scripture phrase, if you will, write down your vision, make it plain, so those who read it can run with it. We don't do that. We don't make it plain who we are, and what we're trying to be. We need to do that.
And I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Senator Durbin said the other day that Amazon.com, the president, he's spoken with the president of Amazon, and once the sales tax issue on internet sales is resolved, that Amazon has indicated they're very interested in bringing a number of distribution facilities to the state of Illinois.
Sure.
Wouldn't it be nice if we had a strategy to go out and try to get somebody like that in here?
And
if we just sit here and say, oh, we'd like to have you call us, not going to happen, folks.
And frankly, the fact that we happen to be one of the few communities that's going to be part of the fiber network that happens to have a significant amount of open space, we have that potential very easily. So we really could poise ourselves to be the place to set up the high-end internet, Google, Amazon, whatever kind of facilities, but we've got to not just say that's a good pipe dream, but we actually have to be able to put wheels on that. So, Trustee Olson, thank you for bringing that up, but we do need to stay on top of that, and it's gonna take more than just thinking about it. So,
Mr. Mayor, you
yes,
said that the CMAP was a possible source. You are correct, and I believe that they take applications after May for upcoming funding sources.
and we might be able to tap them as well as the state.
Exactly.
And I believe Crete, not too long ago, got some funding from them for some planning.
Actually, I think Richmond Park did their comprehensive plan with CMAP funding as well.
Right. So, any additional comments pertaining to the economic development, goals, expectations, or do you feel like, does anybody feel like Monee needs to just stay what we are? Just want to make sure. I don't need a consensus on that. Okay. Nothing further on that. Larry, do we have summary of litigation or anything else that we need to go into executive session regarding?
Litigation, I believe, Mr. Wallace. Dave? Or Dave?
Yes, sir, I'm listening.
Was something from Clantup and Jenkins that you want to talk about with the situation with the ICC?
Yes, yes, that was,
If the board recalls, this is the firm they're representing our interests with the ICC ongoing litigation. There's been some news on that, I believe, and I think the administrator must give an update on that. We're not actively involved, but they are representing our interests with a couple months ago.
Right, we have combined interests pertaining to protecting the status of the water.
Yes, sir.
Right. So if the time is now 8:53, I don't know that we may or may not have action to take after that, but I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make that motion.
Sorry.
Okay, so that was Raisik and Gonzalez. Roll call, please.
Trustee Gray?
Yes.
Horne?
Yes.
Holston?
Yes.
Pop?
Yes.
Raisik?
Yes.
And Gonzalez?
Yes.
Okay.